Buried within the forgotten memory of the past lies a truth so inconceivable that it challenges the very foundations of our understanding. The shocking reality of American slave breeding farms emerges from the depths of secrecy, tearing away the veil of denial. A sinister industry thrived in plain sight within the eerie depths of these farms, hidden by the shadows of oppression. Were there any laws or regulations in place that directly supported or facilitated the operation of American slave breeding farms? How did the existence of these shocking farms perpetuate and reinforce the dehumanization of enslaved individuals? Today, we embark on a journey to expose the sinister depths of this forgotten industry, where the shocking truth emerges from behind the cloak of denial. Slave owners have several methods to gain money. Forced sexual encounters between slaves was one technique to boost births. Slaves were forced to have as many children as possible. Women and young girls with several children were also favored. Slave breeding was done to increase marketable slaves. Slaves had no control over their bodies or offspring under the slave breeding system. Slaves, particularly women, were pressured and rewarded to produce children. They were compelled to mate, and their only function was to create offspring. These ladies suffered and were mistreated. Married slaves suffered too. They had little rights and needed the farm owner's permission to remain together. Only married couples received houses, furnishings, and food plots. Passes to see each other were also given out on a case-by-case basis, especially if the husband and wife lived on different farms. The concept of marriage itself became a way to keep slaves under control and limit their ability to have children. Due to these factors, slaves who received a marriage proposal from their owners gave it serious consideration. If these ideas are turned down, it could lead to bad things like not getting the money and help families need to stay together. In some cases, slave owners did not give each slave a spouse. Think you've heard it all when it comes to the horrors of American slavery. Think again. Prepare to have your worldview shattered as we expose the unimaginable reality of slave breeding farms, a grim aspect of history that will shock you to the core. Instead, they used different kinds of pressure to force women to get pregnant. Even though they were in hard situations, many slaves still wanted to get married and start their own families. Under the system of slavery and slave breeding, it was common for white men and black women to be forced to sleep together. These kinds of meetings happened more often than forced weddings between slaves. Enslaved women could find partners among the farm owner, his sons, nearby planters, guests of the slave-owning family, passing salespeople, and paid workers. Women who were slaves had no control over their bodies and had to do what the people who owned them wanted. There was a huge imbalance of power, and women who were slaves were put in very dangerous situations. These forced meetings happened because of a cruel system that turned slaves into things for the pleasure of those in charge. People who were forced to work as slaves really feared and looked forward to being forced to have children. Many former slaves told stories about being forced to get married on nearby farms, if not on their own. Slaves were very afraid of these kinds of possible encounters because they were always aware of how weak and exploitable they were. Even though not all slave owners took part in or supported forced sexual encounters, the fact that they happened so often shows how degrading and forceful the lives of slaves were. Slavery's power structure and the way black women's choice and freedom were treated made it so that they were pushed into sexual relationships.